Hello, my name is pail-beckett, and today I wanted to speak a little bit about. I have my email under these videos, and I welcome people to reach out to me, and a lot of people do. And sometimes in conversation with others, things will come up to me, and I'll go, I'll kind of, because I was never a spiritual seeker before, self-realization. Sometimes it's not the most obvious thing to me what kind of things might be helpful because I kind of didn't have that seeking experience. It was completely spontaneous for me. So sometimes speaking to others and hearing their questions or their misconceptions or just their thoughts will make me think like, oh, this would be a useful thing to share. So today I want to speak about some of the things that have come up in conversation with others that maybe it might be useful for me just to share generally so everyone can hear. And one of them is the preconceptions that people get about self-realization by watching all these videos online, by reading whatever it is they're reading, just by engaging with all of this content. And a lot of people speak to me and they already have in their head a conceptual idea of what self-realization is. And it becomes almost like a standardized template. Like, oh, this is what it is and this is what it isn't. And like, I'm glad you know, because go even living the experience, I feel like sometimes I can't even put it into words. Does that make sense? So it can come with like almost like a checklist. That's what I've experienced from some people. It is this, it's not this, or what I'm thinking of, it's this. And I think there's a trap to be fallen into there. I think there's a danger in standardizing the idea of this because every single one of us has come with our own set of conditioning from this lifetime. We've all got a little saying that I don't know where I even got this from, but we've all got our own knitting to unpick and we all knitted it ourselves. So it's all completely different. So actually, in terms of how we let things go, the degree to which we let things go, the time frames within we let things go, I would imagine must be different from case to case because we're all carrying different luggage. We've all knitted our own pattern that needs to be unpicked in a certain way. So sometimes, and I can understand why. I can understand why totally. But sometimes people come to me and they're like, "Oh, I've been watching Roman Maharshi and it's this, and this," and I'm like, "Oh, it's not that for me." So it's like, well, why isn't it that for you? And then the mind's blown because they feel like they understood it. They feel like they had it in a box. And that's the mind, that's the ego. The ego wants to categorize, wants to define, wants to enclose things in a box and say it understands it, it owns it. Do you know what I mean? I get this, I understand what this is. And you can't really do this with this. I make these videos in the hope that it can nudge people along the way to see things for themselves. It highly likely will not be exactly the same way I did. Even afterwards, when please God, it happens for you in this lifetime, you're probably going to verbalize it in a different way than I do, and it's all okay. There's not one way to come at this. And by me describing something in one way or describing my experience or my understanding of it isn't to discredit how somebody else might do it. There's no right or wrong answer here. We're all just doing our best to put into words something which really is just beyond anything that words can touch. So this idea of making an identity out of self-realization. Self-realization is this, and this, and that's the order it must come in, and that's how it must be. Otherwise, it's not real, it's not complete, it's not proper, it's not genuine. That's an ego game. It's an ego game. Don't let yourself get caught up into that. The way we experience our true nature, I'm sure, will have a personal slant to all of us, dependent on where we're coming from, where we're starting from, what our conditioning was, what are the set of parameters that we made for ourselves was in our little ego character. So don't let yourself be too rigid about this. Don't let yourself try and categorize it and try and be strict with it and try and make this like identity character almost out of being a self-realized person, because it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. It's just a carrot on a stick. It's another one of those ego games of look but don't find. If it's not this, it mustn't be correct. Do you know what I mean? It's 100% not the way I've experienced it, and I've spoke to a lot of people who have experienced this themselves, and we all have slightly different experiences. Yeah, there's a lot of things that connect them, like the idea of like just a constant sense of peace, um, a constant sense of joy in some, not in others. Do you know what I mean? With me, it came with like a total like feeling of a tidal wave of love that I have for others, for situations, things. But one of my really close friends never experienced that. So she then had to go away, and like she had a little wobble about, well, why aren't I feeling this intense love that Paul's talking about? Do you know what I mean? And it's not that my way was the right way or her way was the right way or any of our ways were wrong ways. It's just we're all going to come at this how we come at it. So don't let it be turned into another set of ideals. Don't let it be turned into another kind of identity to own, to achieve, because that's 100% not what this is. How can you own or achieve what you already are? But what we already are is essentially attributeless. It's everything all at once. So for me, even to sit here and make these videos, it's kind of a bit of a fool's errand, but I just do it because I hope it can help someone. But as soon as I start using words, it's not the truth anymore, because words aren't the truth. I can only approximate, and I try to not to be general in a way, because I don't want to be too specific, because as soon as I get too specific, I'm really turning it into something that it's not. Do you know what I mean? So it seems like a paradox, and so much of spirituality seems like a paradox when you're coming at it from the other side. When you're coming at it with a dualistic outlook, everything's got an opposite. And if it's this, it can't be this, because these two things can't exist at the same time. But that's not how I'm experiencing it. So it's like saying, okay, so it's empty, it's spacious, but it's also full, and it's rich and it's abundant. They feel like they can't coexist together, but in the experience of it, they do. It's easy for me to say, because once you've saw it, once you've experienced it, your questions go, because you realize that like there isn't a question. Does that make sense? You've experienced it, and you just realize the entirety of what it is. And then there's kind of not a personal standpoint and a personal point of view to want to heckle or to want to ask questions or to be confused. You're just part of it, and you realize that you never weren't a part of it. So the idea of these paradoxes, this is another thing that often when I speak to people, I can see their minds blowing up. But it's like when we're talking about like an overwhelming kind of peace, but also like this effervescent joy. Do you know what I mean? It seems like it's two things, because our minds in this dualistic way of being want to turn things into dualism, but it's non-dualism. It just is, and it's everything at once. There's nothing that it's not. But if I had to try and put words to it to describe it, for me, in my experience, it's peace, it's joy, it's a sense of freedom, love, but not love in the way that I ever understood love before. Not love in a I trade you my love in exchange for your love. Not love as in I would like to kindly own you like a pet. Not love as in I have any kind of expectation from you. Just love as in given, as in service, as in I have enough. I'm given. It's a radiance. It's a pure radiance, like the sun. The sun just shines, and it doesn't matter what's going on around it. It's still shining. It gives out the same amount of light, the same amount of heat, regardless. So it's just like this ceaseless like radiant giving, and that's how I understood love to be. Not asking for anything in return for it, not expecting anything, not even thinking that like, oh, I'm giving you this, how good am I being? Just I have it to give, so of course I will give. That's how it feels. So those kind of four things, I think, is the best way I can put into words how I feel. Again, other people are going to do it different. Rupert Spira is going to say a different thing. David Bingham could say a different thing. Ramana Maharshi could have used it differently, but actually look beyond the words, because the words, I've heard the word pointers use words, and it's a brilliant way, whoever coined that, because the words aren't telling you anything. They're just a little nudge, a little signpost to make you look a certain way and realize for yourself, and then realize that the word could never cover what it was. So paradoxes all become resolved when you realize the oneness. There's nothing separate to me. I'm one with all that is. So there's no me and no you. There's no here and no there. There's no past and no future. There is just what is. Now, I'm saying that, and in some of my more meditative moments, I can feel totally detached from anything, from time, from place, from the idea of a person. But of course, I still operate in the world. So I will still remember things. I will still find myself projecting things, but just not nearly as much as I did before, and not compulsively, not setting it up as my own little script. And if it doesn't happen this way, it's wrong. If it doesn't happen, it's then, as soon as I project something, I then need to be anxious that it is going to turn out the way I've projected it. Otherwise, it's wrong. It's not right. It's not what I want. I don't have that feeling anymore. It's kind of like an easiness. People have used the word surrender, and surrender as well has kind of got quite negative connotations in our culture, hasn't it? As like a giving up, or like almost a sign of weakness. Maybe I surrender, but just surrendering to what is just like, it comes from wholeness. It comes from satisfaction of I have enough. I know what I am. So what's happening is just incidental. The plans, the stories, the narratives, all the storylines, the character goings on are just all incidental to me knowing what I am, and that being enough for me. And in that fullness, in that oneness, all the paradoxes that my mind could throw up and start to make questions and problems out of disappear. It's kind of like they don't exist anymore, because there is nothing to be in opposition with anything else. So the idea of paradoxes, when you'll hear that, and you'll hear it in all non-dualistic content, yes, from the dualistic mind, it seems impossible. And it also just seems like I could understand. I never came at this before this happened for me, so I could understand, but I can put myself in the shoes of hearing this before, and I can imagine I'd just be like, this is nonsense. How can it be this and this at the same time? How can it be this? So I've said this before, and it's the best way I can put it. It's the difference to reading the menu and then eating the meal. I can read the menu a million times. I can smell the meal, I can see it from across the restaurant, but until I've put it in my mouth, I then go, wow, that's it. I get it. So don't be put off by this idea of paradoxes. Sometimes when the mind wants to kick up, these objections and these controversies to things, it's just a delaying tactic, because the ego doesn't want to be undone. It would rather heckle. It would rather say this is too difficult. It would rather say, oh, I can't possibly follow this path. It makes no sense to me. And it will all open up to you when you're ripe for it opening up to you. And that can be now. You don't have to wait. You don't have to wait at all. But you'll allow yourself to be there and accept being there when you can allow yourself to be there and accept being there. Another thing is I speak to a lot of people who, as I'm listening to them and as I'm kind of observing them, they're saying all the right things, but then it comes with this strive to move on. They can just never quite accept they've got all the concepts, and they're like, I'm spending a lot of time where I am feeling really peaceful, spending a lot of time where I am surrendered just to what's happening. I spend a lot of time where I do just feel like a joy for no reason, but then there's something in them which just won't let them rest there. Which just always tells them there's something else to understand. There must be something more to this. And it's so simple. You could write everything there is to know about this on the back of a postage stamp. And again, people don't want to hear that because the ego is created for complication. Look at the world around us. Saying you are what you are is such an obvious comment, but if you're unaware of what you are, it's like you're looking for your own house out your own front window, and maybe it's over here, and maybe what I've got to do is do this, and this, X, Y, and Z. I must learn this, I must do this practice, I must do all these things, because you're turning it into a journey. And I've heard people talk about it as a journey before, but it's a journey without distance. It can feel like a journey, and I understand that as well. It can feel like a journey, but ultimately the joke, that the reason I laughed so much is because when I realized, I was like, I was never not this. It was here. It was the closest thing to me. It was the me that I knew myself to be behind the voice of my mind. And I'd always been aware of it and completely ignored it until I saw it. And then I was like, this is the most obvious thing in the world. Oh my God, I was laughing and I was crying for joy. But I was, how could I have ignored this? It's literally here, waving at me my entire life. And I've ignored it. I've turned around, like I've looked through it like it's not there, because I've been so busy been so busy distracting myself with all the avenues of the world and all the things to achieve and all the things to become and all the things to improve and all the things to fix and all the things to change, that I just couldn't see the closest thing to me that had never not been here. It wasn't like one day it appeared. When I noticed it, I was like, I'm so familiar. It's the most familiar thing in the world to me because it's me. And then deeper than that, I was like, this thing that I'm calling me is everything. And you can use the word God. I used the word God because I didn't have another word for it. I didn't, at that point, I hadn't heard of awareness or, source or things like that. I had to use the word God because it was the only word that came into my head that could describe it. I was like, what I've just realized myself to be is God, not as an object outside of myself, not as a personification, of a man in the clouds with a beard, not as anything like that, just as the essence of all that is. And there was not a question. I didn't have to go, but why is it this and not that? I just went, I accepted it straight away. It was like every part of me remembered. So this idea of placing it outside of yourself as an achievement, as a journey, as something that you will be worthy of when you learn enough, or when you do enough spiritual practice, or when you purify enough. I hear this a lot. I need to purify my chakras. I need to do all of this thing. The journey will be there while you think the journey is necessary. But I am living proof that it can be noticed without. So even though I wasn't a spiritual seeker before, I called myself an atheist, which is hysterical. Even though I wasn't a spiritual seeker before, I realize now that I was kind of unconsciously, subconsciously, I don't know which word is the right word for it here, asking what were in effect spiritual questions to myself. I always had the idea that there was more than meets the eye. to everything that's going on. And I really loved fantasy and sci-fi and things like that. I wasn't interested in the world as it appeared before me because something about it seemed unsatisfying. Something about it just seemed a bit like a film set, a bit just plastic, like not substantial. And so I got quite irreverent about it. I ignored it. I made up my own world. I lived very much like, and now I think about it, that was kind of a form of spiritual seeking of me being like, this isn't right. What I'm seeing here isn't the full picture. I could never have explained that to myself or rationalized it to myself at the time. I didn't know why I felt the way I felt, but I knew that I did. And then on top of that, I remember when I was a little boy, thinking to myself, I'm really special. And then when that thought would come into my head, thinking, I can never tell anybody that because that's a horrible thing to say about yourself. That's big-headed. That's arrogant. That's all of these things. And I was too young to even question it. And all through my life, this same thing of just the wealth of myself was there. And I used to think, oh, that's a horrible personality trait. I can never tell anybody that I feel this way. I can never tell anybody that I feel like there's treasure inside of me because that's not how we're taught in the world. We're taught to be self-depreciating and not arrogant and never boastful and nothing. And I linked that with that when what I was really recognizing was just this abundance in me, this joy. But I was linking it to my ego character and thinking that I thought I was something big and something special, but that's never what I meant. I just recognized this treasure in me. I never mentioned it. Never mentioned it for as long, for as long as I lived. I'm here, I'm living, and I'm mentioning it. But I never said it because I thought that's a bad thing. That's a bad thing to think about yourself. I couldn't deny that I felt it. It's what else? What else has come up in conversation with people? Our humanness. Okay, this is one. So I spoke to a couple of people and the subject of sexuality has come up, and that's not something we hear a lot in spiritual things, unless we hear it all about, oh, explore your divine sexuality. And it's all about, having, I don't know, orgies with bongo drums and crystals in the background and all this, I don't know. But about kind of a shunning of sexuality or a shame around it. And it's something that I felt as well when I realized in the weeks later on, I had this overwhelming kind of wave of what felt like lust. But I was trying to understand it, and it wasn't. It was my old programming coming up to be released. But I was like, why do I have these feelings for literally every single person I look at? And it wasn't. It was kind of like a releasing of myself from the identification with the body. And in doing that, I needed to release those around me, because it isn't really those around me. It's only myself from identification with bodies. And that came up for me, and it's coming up for other people, obviously, because they're getting in touch with me and wanting to speak about it. And I'm like, well, okay, it's funny because we've shamed sexuality in culture. It's funny, everybody does it. Everybody thinks about it. But we've told ourselves, like, oh, that's one that you keep in the dark cupboard. But while we're here, I'm not a body. I'm not human. I'm not a man or a woman. I'm not a race. I'm not the character. I'm none of those things. But I'm in a human incarnation. So guess what? I eat. And if I didn't eat, I would miss eating. The body would get sick and the body would waste away. I go to the toilet. I need to do that. I sleep. I need to do that within the parameters of being a human. Sexuality is just one of those things. So why would I shame myself about it? And I don't shame myself about the fact that I need to go and do a poo. I don't shame myself about the fact that I need to go to bed. I don't shame myself about the fact that I need to breathe. It's as fundamental in being a human as any of those things. But it's so funny. The ego wants to turn. That's a really good ego game at you. That oh, think you're so spiritual. What about this? And like, it's a dirty little secret we've all got. There's nothing about it. What I did need to do, however, is realize I'm not a body and you're not a body. So this fascination with bodies that I had before, and I believe, most of us have got, had to be looked at and had to be forgiven almost. So I have a practice when I walk around in the street. I don't do it all the time, obviously, because sometimes I'm thinking about something or whatever. But while I'm present and there, and everybody that I walk past, I either say in my mind, I love you, or I say in my mind, I bless you. Or sometimes I've got a little thing that I run through, and I'm like, I'm not a body, you're not a body, we're Christ, and we're forgiven now. And I say it to everybody, and I just go, our minds are joined, just not one mind. If we're not bodies, then we're certainly not singular minds. We're not souls. How can we be a soul? How can we be a singular point of energy when all there is one? So the ego game carries on, carries on, carries on. So you could release yourself from a body and then believe yourself to be a little knot of energy called a soul. It's not how I've experienced this. So looking at your humanness, and I've heard the word honor in it, and that seems to be, it's not to be honored, and it's not to be rejected. It's just to be like, it's just part of the game. It's neither here nor there. It's everything has the meaning that we assign to it. So if we call something bad and shameful, guess what? It's bad and shameful, but it wasn't. In some cultures, it would be looked at that different. In some time periods, it'd be looked at different. Let's think about, there's an infinity of other planets. How many of them are inhabited? What did they think about sexuality? What did they think about? Because their programming and their cultural significance, it would be completely different to ours. So how can any of this be right? It's just, while I'm here appearing to be this game piece on this game board, that's just a part of what humanity is. Now, I don't need to empower it by investing loads of energy into it and becoming obsessive. And I don't need to empower it by resisting, and tying myself in energetic opposition to it, which gives it just as much power. I just need to accept this. That's part of what it is. And not beat myself up. And how can you be kind to others if you can't even be kind to yourself? So you have to be able to swallow the medicine first before you can offer the medicine out. So that's come up in a lot of conversations. And the reason why, I mean, it's a little bit of a different video for me today. The reason why I say this is because quite often in these conversations that I have, I think, oh, I wish other people could hear this, because it's valuable. It's valuable, the things that are coming up, and it's things that perhaps I wouldn't have thought to mention until someone's come to me with something they're confused over or worried about or interested in. I go, that would be really valuable for everybody to hear. So they were some of the main ones. If I think of any more, maybe I'll make another little video like this, but I can't stress enough how much you need to make this personal, not about you as a character, but stop throwing everything out here. Stop making your little checklist from the internet. Stop judging yourself for the carryings on. Listen, I have done some absolutely stinking things in my life. Do I sit here beating myself up about it? No, I've forgiven it. Did I before? 100%. Or did I just look at it in a little bit cupboard and not want to think about it because I can't believe that ever happened? 100%. But now it's just like, it's like, Monopoly, like the dog, the top hat, the car, we're all just those pieces on the game board, believing that we're those pieces, but we're actually the thing that's moving the pieces. And there is only one thing playing the game with itself. And guess what? I don't believe that thing playing the game with itself is what we would call God. I believe that thing playing the game with itself is what we would call ego. The entire universe is the idea. Could I be separate? Could I be separate from my source? Could I be separate? Could I be what I'm not? It's the entire premise of this universe, this world, this game we're playing. So have a think. I know these are some massive ideas. As it's coming out of my mouth, it seems so obvious to me now, but I can still remember the time before when if I heard this, I'd just be like, what the, like this. So be gentle with yourself, be kind with yourself, just be with the ideas, be with them. Don't need to prove them right and don't need to prove them wrong. Just be with them, because this knowledge will work in you. It's like sowing a seed. You don't need to do nothing. Remember, the ego wants to think that it's responsible for everything, even its own spiritual evolution. It's not. Okay, so just let yourself be exposed to these ideas and then let them be in you, let them grow in you without anything from you. Okay, because it will. It really will. I love you. Okay, bye.